Hi, welcome to Business Link. I'm Jason Ball, President and CEO of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. We're here in the AOI podcast studio at the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce offices and really excited about an important conversation to one of our foundational services in Lincoln related to our energy policy, and that is electricity. I'm joined today by Emeka Anyanwu. He is the new CEO of our Lincoln Electric System. Emeka, welcome to the Chamber.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here in Lincoln, and excited to be part of the conversation. It's been a wonderful transition here. I'm now just past the 100-day mark here, and everything seems to be going well. So excited to be here.
Fantastic! Congratulations. Now,
Thank you.
For folks that haven't met you yet or had an opportunity to hear you speak, you have some pretty deep Midwestern roots here. Can you maybe give just a little bit of your background and history and what brought you back to Lincoln?
Absolutely. No, definitely. The Midwest is in my blood. So I was born in Ames, Iowa. Mm-hmm. So I'm a proud second generation Cyclone. Go Cyclones. But I was born in Ames, Iowa. My parents both went to school at the university there, and lived there as a small child. Lived a big chunk of all of my childhood after that in Nigeria, which is where my family is from, but then came back to the States as a college student and wound up back at Iowa State. So like I said, I got my engineering degree there. And then I spent the first almost 16 years of my career in Kansas City at Kansas City Power and Light Company. That's the organization that's now Evergy. And that was a great learning experience, a great growth experience in the industry. From there, I took an opportunity, went to Seattle for a little bit, and then I came back to Lincoln. And so, as you said, the Midwest is in my blood. This is certainly something that is very, very near and dear to me, and it was exciting to have the opportunity really to be back here and to be working in another one of our great mid-sized Midwestern cities where we've got a lot going on, a lot of great work ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think with that background that you have and just an innate understanding of places like Kansas City, places in Iowa, that has to lend itself to a good understanding of the primary forces and strategy that you're looking at here in eastern Nebraska now.
Yeah, I think it does. And I've remarked to you and many others, of course, that I see a lot of parallels between Lincoln and Kansas City, particularly Kansas City when I was starting my career. The growth, the economic activity, some of the conversations about, what does it take to serve a growing city? And so, it's definitely something that feels very familiar to me. I've learned some really great lessons in the process of my career that I think I can hopefully bring to the table in the conversation here in Lincoln. And, again, I do think the experience in cities like Lincoln is different, right? Because I think a lot gets said and written about for a lot of our big metropolitan areas. And of course, I got to live that for almost 6 years, spending some time in Seattle. But these mid-sized Midwestern cities really are, they're the heartbeat, right, of our country and our economy, right? And so much of what goes on in places like Lincoln really defines life and quality of life across the country, and certainly for great communities. So, it's a really sort of a neat full circle moment, really, for me to come back to a place like Lincoln and be able to do what I love, which is work on how we continue to provide the energy services that our communities need to have a thriving quality of life.
Yeah. Now, as we're recording this, as you mentioned, you're just over that 100-day threshold. That's always that sprint period for a new executive to come into an organization, get to know people in the community, listen to what themes in the community are popping out. Can you share maybe a couple things you've learned or a couple surprises that have come up in that getting to know the community period?
Yeah. So, I've really spent most of the first 100 days focused on people. And that's been people within the organization, obviously, getting to know LES, getting to know the people, the structure, the work, some of the things that we have ongoing and ahead of us, getting to understand some of the dynamics and the organizational culture, and really sort of let folks get to know me. And, also people outside the utility, right? So the people we serve, the community we serve, our stakeholders, our customers, certainly, and the communities and families that make up those groups. And so I've had obviously the great fortune to have gotten to meet you in the chamber really early on, and that's been a great kind of jumping off point to meet lots of folks and get to know lots of the businesses, lots of the business and civic leaders here in the city. And that's been really, really valuable as I'm trying to, for the benefit of my role, I'm trying to really understand the character of the community and the soul of the community. And so, it's been really sort of fun. Again, as I talked about this great mid-sized Midwestern city, one of the things I always love about cities like Lincoln, and it very much comes through in a big way with Lincoln, is how committed the people who are in and live in and serve Lincoln are to this community, right? Yeah. People really identify with what Lincoln is and does, from our great mayor all the way down to every single business leader and nonprofit leader and civic leader that I've met, right? People really, this community resonates. This community really, people are attached to living in Lincoln and being Lincolnites and really what the potential is for our city. And that's been one of the best things, right, is just really knowing that, for an organization like LAS, whose very, success and sort of work, right, is embedded within the community, right? We are the energy that powers Lincoln in so many ways. Knowing that we are serving a community of people who are so as committed to this community as we are, is incredibly valuable. And it's been a really good sort of anchoring point for me as I understand, how we're going to move forward at LES. And then beyond that, obviously, there's still lots of conversations operationally in terms of the things that are ahead of us from a utility perspective. Obviously, a lot is changing in the energy sector. A lot is changing in the utility business. Yeah. We've got a lot of, sort of classic and not so classic sort of challenges and opportunities ahead of us that we certainly are well equipped to handle. But certainly there's work to do there. There's good work to do there, and we're very excited. So we're going to be talking a lot about LES's strategy going forward. And we expect to be communicating broadly and deeply in many cases with our community of customers, the communities we serve, understanding who they need and want us to be as an organization. And that will be part of our strategic conversation. And then along the way, we're going to be addressing all of the tactical things that we need to address that help keep the lights on, that help keep the community served, that help people here in Lincoln and all of the communities that we serve stay attached to our utility and the work that we do and the product that we provide.
One of the questions that comes up a lot, I think, in the minds of the business community and just ratepayers in general is you mentioned the changing technology in this space and energy generation mix and resources for that energy comes up a lot. These are things I think everybody's pretty pragmatic in the business community. We need to get our arms around in pursuing green energy options, but at the same time, there's a little bit of it's a balancing act in terms of taking measures that are appropriate, but doing so in a way that still protects your ratepayers, right? How do you plan to kind of address some of those balances as we get into how we draw our energy, where we get our energy from?
Yeah, I love how you framed the question because you use the word balance, and that's really the key. The most important, so I'm going to get a little bit engineer on you here.
Yeah.
The most important equation in our business is what we call the supply-demand balance, right? And that is that instantaneous thing where the amount of energy we supply has to be instantaneously equal to the amount of energy that is demanded, right? So the energy that is needed has to be matched by supply, right? So balance, right, is so thematic in our business. And balance really is what applies to what you're talking about. I think the realities for us are going to hinge a lot on trying to have the right real conversations, where we can be objective and clear about what is real and what is not. The transition to non-emitting sources, the decarbonization transmission, the kinds of thought process, and again, to be very clear, the community-driven intention that fuels, that is behind our decarbonization objectives at the utility, are very much about that balance. And those realities exist in an environment where we live in a society that is increasingly energy demanding, right? Not because necessarily, we're doing something to sort of be more or less sort of energy aware, but it's more because of the way we are in an increasingly digital society.
Yeah.
What does digital require? Digital requires energy, right? And so, the reality is, in addition to our intentions around decarbonization and sustainability, there is just a need to grow all of the above approach to energy, right? And so, we want to, as much as possible, not make this about a popularity contest between the different kinds of sources of energy, right? But really make this about the pragmatic choices we have to make to maintain balance, right? To maintain the balance between what is practical in terms of our energy sources, whether you're talking about, natural gas, or you're talking about nuclear, you're talking about sort of all of these kind of traditional fuel-driven sources of energy, and what I will call, for the purposes of this conversation, some of those sources that are not only renewable and carbon free, but are also fuel saving. Right. Because, wind and solar and some of those kinds of resources allow us to also better extend and leverage the fuel that we have for other sources. So, and again, growing that overall output, right, is going to be critical for our society, right? We are seeing a society that is increasingly driven by digital solutions, driven by data, right? And data centers and automation, computers, and all this. And all of this is energy demanding, right? And so for us, it's going to be very much about making sure we're continuing to invest in energy that allows us to power a society, that allows us to power that thriving quality of life that I described, that we prize so much here in Lincoln.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, given the extensive experience and exposure you've had to energy generation and electric utility providing across the country, Nebraska is, I believe, the only public power state entirely. And is there, obviously there's the difference in profit margin and the drive for those, but at the same time, even public power really needs to keep the numbers in the black, right? We got to stay on the positive side of the ledger. And so is there any kind of a fundamental difference you see in terms of a public power entity versus a for-profit entity, or is it just kind of the same work and same trade-offs, just maybe with some different numbers attached to it?
Yeah, great question. And I always like to try to do this thoughtfully. So the first part of my career, as I described, I grew up in what it was and is an investor-owned utility, right? And so that's the different model that you described of investor-owned, for-profit, for lack of a better way of putting it, utility. And what I will tell you, I know both from that experience and from all of my interactions with lots of great utility organizations and people in a career that's been, more than 2 decades, is that we all share that DNA, that desire to serve the community, to keep the lights on, right? If I took a hard hat off of a line worker from a big IOU and a hard hat off of one of our great line workers here at LES, and I just talked to them about the work that they do, you would not be able to tell the difference. I could say the same thing about engineers and environmental professionals and lots of folks, IT professionals who work in our industry, right? They all have that same real connection to the services we provide and how they power a community. But public power is different because part of what we have the benefit of and the privilege of is serving with a very clear understanding of what our purpose is.
Yeah.
Right? There is no split incentive for us. There is no need to prioritize anything other than being the most valuable asset we can be to the community we serve. And that part, by the way, of being in the black is part of that, right? Because if we cannot run something that can sustain itself financially, then we can't run, right? I mean, to use kind of one of my favorite things to use, which is a sports analogy, right? You got to be in the game to affect the game, right? And so we have to be running an effective sort of organization from a fiscal perspective in order to be able to stay serving the community in the way that we need to do. But part of what that also means for public power, right? And this is one of the amazing things about Nebraska as the only public power state, is that it allows us to have conversations. And I go back to something I said earlier, which is how do we have real conversations that are about the solutions for the communities that need us to be effective, right? And we don't have to quibble and argue about profit margins and returns on equity and some of these other things that some of our fine colleagues in on the other side of this sometimes have to reckon with. We just have to make sure as LES that what we are doing is making our utility the best possible asset for the people of Lincoln and surrounds that we serve. And so that clear-eyed nature that we share with all of the other great public power entities in Nebraska allows us to approach our work in a very thoughtful, pragmatic, and practical way, and also allows us to maintain very clear-eyed understanding of sort of the outcomes that we're chasing after. So I love that about doing this job. I love that about LES. It really makes the job for someone like myself very clear, right? And clear is often good when there are a lot of other things that are very complex about our business.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially given the trends that are happening. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention and share with folks that are watching this how central Lincoln Electric System is to all of our efforts related to economic development in Lincoln. I've been doing economic development since about 2008, and I can't think of a single project I've ever worked where the business didn't ask for some connection, some information, or seek a strong relationship to the electric utility provider that we're working with. And that's certainly been true here. Your staff has always been great for our staff at the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development to work with. And we want to thank you and them for that. What do you look at in terms of trends related to economic development in Lincoln, or projects that LES is working with as you look forward in the next 10 years?
Yeah. Thanks for that question as well. And obviously, I can't take any credit for some of the great partnership that our team has had with the chamber and LPED for all these years. I can certainly say that because of my career arc, I've developed a great appreciation for the partnership that does have to exist with utilities and the forces of economic development, both chambers of commerce and otherwise. And so, I will just really briefly say that, I grew up in my career at a time when economic development was happening in the city that I was working in a very sort of transformational and kind of a milestones, sort of many important milestones. So I was in Kansas City and working in the utility business when what now is this sort of great, really globally known entertainment district, the Kansas City Power and Light District, was sort of taking its formative steps, right? And so I developed a deep appreciation, right, for the role that utilities played. I got to be part of that on the technical side of things. And so I think it is fundamental. It's fundamental that we continue to understand our role as a utility in that conversation and in that work. You know, and the reason utilities do that is because an economically vibrant community is what allows utilities to be successful. Yeah. We want a community that is thriving. We want a community that is growing. We want a community that sees our product as a way to grow and expand and provide great jobs and great livelihoods and great experiences, great opportunity for people and families. And so that will continue to be something that's really, really very near and dear to LES. It will be work that we continue to focus on. We certainly know that there's a lot going on relative to, again, growth, commercial opportunity, residential growth. You know, the work that we all have to do together around housing access is really, really critical. And we know that LES will need to play a really fundamental role in that. And we will be committed to that work. And I think that is, again, those are really kind of foundational ideas. You know, the other thing that is really, really important, and again, is part of all of this together, is workforce, right? For all of, you know, I've had some really great conversations with, you know, great business leaders and civic leaders already, you know, here, even just in the first 100+ days, about workforce, right? You know, for our business, we are in a very fundamental transformation or fundamental kind of inflection point where we are seeing kind of a generational turnover. And so, you know, LES has had significant turnover, and we've got, as I was talking to some of our HR folks the other day, a significant percentage of our staff that is or will become retirement eligible within the next half decade, right? And so for us, working in the community around economic development, working on sort of those economic cluster ideas that develop great talent, great workforce, ecosystems for all of the employers in Lincoln is going to be really, really important. And a lot of that comes from all of us kind of pulling on the oars relative to economic development.
Yeah, yeah. Emeka Anyanwu, welcome to Lincoln. Welcome back to the Midwest. We're thrilled to have you, and thank you so much for jumping right in with the Chamber and Economic Development to grow this city.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much, and I can't wait to continue to be part of the conversation. This is just a wonderful community for me. Me and my family could not be more thrilled to be in Lincoln, and it's been really an incredible pleasure of the first a couple months here to get to meet you in the Chamber and to be involved in some of these conversations, and I can't wait for them to continue.
It's gonna be a fun road ahead.
Absolutely.
I look forward to working with you. Everyone, that's our Business Link episode today here in the AOI podcast studio. I'm Jason Ball with your Chamber of Commerce. Check us out online at lcoc.com or selectlincoln.org, and we will see you next time.